Allah Azza wa Jal created the heavens and the earth for us to know Him and to worship Him based upon that knowledge. So you would not be fulfilling your purpose in life, as we discussed in our talk in the university. You would not be fulfilling your purpose in life unless you are learning about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and unless you are worshipping Allah based upon that knowledge that you are seeking. My dear brothers, Allah has placed virtues in seeking knowledge that are unique to it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, شَهِدَ اللَّهُ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُ وَالْمَلَائِكَةُ وَأُولُو الْعِلْمِ قَائِمًا بِالْقِسْطِ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ. Allah bears witness that there is no God worthy of worship but Him. So do the angels and the people of knowledge, that He is maintaining His creation in justice. There is no God worthy of worship but Him, Al-Aziz Al-Hakim. The important thing in this ayah is that Allah testifies that there is no God worthy of worship but Him, and we know that. But Allah Azza wa Jal only mentions the testimony of three: His own testimony, and the testimony of the angels, and the testimony of the people of knowledge. As though Allah Azza wa Jal is telling you, as for the other people, their witness doesn't count the way that these witnesses count. Because as for the other people, their witness is not based upon firm, certain knowledge. And so Allah Azza wa Jal honored the people of knowledge by mentioning them along with Him and along with the angels. Allah Azza wa Jal said, يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا قيل لكم تفسحوا في المجالس فافسحوا يفسح الله لكم وإذا قيل انشزوا فانشزوا يرفع الله الذين آمنوا منكم والذين أوتوا العلم درجات والله بما تعملون خبير. O you who have believed, when you are told to make space in the assemblies, make space. Allah will make space for you. And when you are told to arise, then arise. Allah will raise those who have believed among you and those who are given knowledge by degrees. And Allah is all acquainted with what you do. So Allah promised to raise the rank of people who have been given knowledge. And in the narration of Kathir ibn Qais, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, كنت جالسا مع أبي الدرداء في مسجد دمشق فجاءه رجل فقال يا أبا الدرداء إني جئتك من مدينة الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم لحديث بلغني أنك تحدثه عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ما جئت لحاجة. Kathir ibn Qais narrates, I was sitting in the masjid with Abu Darda in Damascus, when a man came and said, O Abu Darda, I came to you from the city of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and all the way from Medina, all the way to Damascus, because of one hadith I heard you narrate it from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I didn't come for any other reason. قال فإني سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول من سلك طريقا يطلب فيه علما سلك الله به طريقا من طرق الجنة. He said, I heard the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم say, whoever sets out on a path seeking knowledge on it, Allah will take him on a path to the paths of Jannah. In some of the wordings of the hadith, Allah will make his path to Jannah easy. وَإِنَّ الْمَلَائِكَةَ تَضَعُ أَجْنِحَتَهَا رِضًا لِطَالِبِ الْعِلْمِ وَإِنَّ الْعَالِمَ لَيَسْتَغْفَرُ لَهُ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَالْحِيتَانُ فِي جَوْفِ الْمَاءِ. He said, the angels lower their wings out of pleasure for the person who seeks knowledge. knowledge of Islam. And the scholar, everything in the heavens and the earth, even the fish in the sea, seek forgiveness for them. وَإِنَّ فَضْلَ الْعَالِمِ عَلَى الْعَابِدِ كَفَضْلِ الْقَمَرِ لَيْلَةَ الْبَدْرِ عَلَى سَائِرِ الْكَوَاكِبِ. The virtue of the scholar over the worshipper is like the virtue of the moon on the night when it's full over all of the other stars. I want you to think about something, my brothers. Allah Azza wa Jal said the virtue of the scholar over the worshipper. And He didn't say the virtue of the scholar over the one who's not practicing, or the one who doesn't pray properly, or the one who is the regular, 9 to 5 kind of Muslim, Jumu'ah, and whatever. He didn't say that. He spoke about the virtue of the scholar over the one who fasts all day and prays all night. It's like the virtue of the moon over the rest of the stars on the night when it's full. وَإِنَّ الْعُلَمَاء وَرَثَةُ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ. The scholars, they are the inheritors of the prophets. وَإِنَّ الْأَنْبِيَاءَ لَمْ يُوَرِّثُوا دِينَارًا وَلَا دِرْهَمًا. And the prophets never left behind gold and silver coins. Prophets never left behind money. وَرَّثُوا الْعِلْمِ. They left behind knowledge. فَمَنْ أَخَذَهُ أَخَذَ بِحَظٍ وَافِرٍ. Whoever takes it has taken an abundant portion of good. فَإِخْوَانِ, who from us doesn't want to be one of these people? That Allah made His path to Jannah easy. That everything in the heavens and the earth asks forgiveness for them, even the fish in the sea. That the angels lower their wings because of pleasure out of what they're doing. That they are the inheritors of the prophets and the inheritor of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Those that Allah Azza wa Jal said, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءِ. The only people who really fear Allah among His servants are the people of knowledge. Knowing that Allah Azza wa Jal commanded the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to ask for more knowledge. فَتَعَالَى اللَّهُ الْمَلِكُ الْحَقِّ وَلَا تَعْجَلْ بِالْقُرْآنِ مِنْ قَبْلِ أَنْ يُقْضَى إِلَيْكَ وَحْيُهُ وَقُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا. Exalted is Allah, the Sovereign, the Truth, and do not hasten with recitation of the Quran before the revelation is completed for you, and say, my Lord, increase me in knowledge. If the Prophet ﷺ was told to ask for more knowledge, and he was a prophet, that Jibreel came down with the Quran, نَزَلَ بِهِ الرُّوحُ الْأَمِينَ عَلَى قَلْبِكَ, upon his heart. Jibreel came down and brought the Quran to the heart of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and he's still told to say, رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا, my Lord, give me more knowledge. And that is because of a hadith narrated by the noble companion Muawiyah bin Abi Sufyan radiyallahu anhuma, that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, مَنْ يُرِدِ اللَّهُ بِهِ خَيْرًا يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. Whoever Allah wants good for, He gives him fiqh of the religion. He gives him understanding. Fiqh here doesn't mean al-furu' al-fiqhiyah. It doesn't mean the issue of, the madhahib and the fiqh rules, the laws, but understanding, detailed, in-depth understanding, al-fahmu al-daqiq, precise, detailed, in-depth understanding of the religion. If Allah gives this to a person, this is a person that Allah Azza wa Jal wants good for. مَنْ يُرِدِ اللَّهُ بِهِ خَيْرًا يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. Al-Imam Ibn al-Qayyim said something, and this is what I'm basing my lecture upon tonight. He said something amazing. He said it in Kitab al-Fawaid. Very small, it's a very small sentence. The person who understands it benefits a great deal. He said, الجهل بالطريق وآفاتها والمقصود يوجب التعب الكثير مع الفائدة القليلة. He said, ignorance of the path and its hardships and the objective means that you will have a great deal of effort for very little benefit. So I want us to understand exactly what he said. He said, if you don't know what you are aiming for, and you don't know the path which will get you there, and you don't know the obstacles and the hardships which will come on the way, you're going to do an awful lot of work for very little benefit. And this is the reality when it comes to learning the knowledge of Islam. A lot of us are like that. Many of us attend many lessons in the masjid. Walillah alhamd. Our YouTube feed's full of Islamic videos. And I'm not talking about 30-second ones that you swipe through. I mean, proper lectures. We attend dawrat and mu'tamarat. We attend courses and we attend conferences. And we make a lot of effort in that. But you see this person after 5 years, after 10 years, after 20 years, and the benefit they got was quite small compared to the huge amount of effort that they gave. And Ibn al-Qayyim said this came from 3 mistakes, one or all, combination of them. Either al-jahlu bit-tariq, the person doesn't know the right road to take. It's like I'm trying to find the masjid, but nobody gave me the address. So what I do is I come to Norwich and I just start driving around the streets, up and down, around. I go out and I come back in, and I go out and come back in, and I think, wallah, one day maybe I'll find the masjid, inshallah. Sahih, I could find it, lekin I made a lot of effort and I wasted a lot of petrol for a very little benefit. I made a lot of effort and it was very hard. Lekin if somebody said, look, you come in here, this road, turn right here. When you reach the end of the junction, go left. Go along to the roundabout, take this exit, come around here, you'll see the masjid on your left-hand side. Very easy to follow. We need a map like that for talabul ilm, for seeking knowledge of this religion. The second problem is, that Ibn al-Qayyim mentioned, is al-jahlu bi'athatiha. Not knowing the hardships, the calamities, the problems that might happen along the way. That's why a lot of times what happens is we start something and we sit down and we say, right, Bismillah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to memorize the Quran. I'm going to learn Islamic knowledge. Bismillah, I'm going to do it. And they sit down and then something comes in the way. I teach in an online Islamic academy called AMAU, and in this academy many people join. Wallahi, many people. We have lots of people joining, but we have lots of people leaving. And most of the time those people are not leaving because they didn't really like the teacher, or they didn't really, they didn't really enjoy the topic. But most people are leaving because things come in your way that you were not prepared for. You weren't really mentally prepared. Like if somebody told you you're gonna run a marathon in 3 weeks' time. You know how long you have to run. You understand you're gonna get tired, your legs are gonna hurt, you're gonna get thirsty, you're gonna get dehydrated, you're gonna maybe feel like you wanna collapse, you're gonna need to train, you've got to mentally, you know what might happen to you. Like, it's like someone who you said, just jog over there to the corner, and then after you kept telling them to go a bit further, and the person has no expectation of what is going to come on the road. So it's very important that we have expectation of the obstacles we might face and how to overcome them. And sometimes the person doesn't really know what they're aiming for. Al-jahlu bil-maqsood. They don't really know what they're aiming for. And this can take many forms. Sometimes the person doesn't really have an idea of what the end goal looks like. That's why sometimes people say, I want to be a scholar. And I say to them, what's a scholar? And they look, and they realize that might have been a good question to ask first. Because the person doesn't have an idea of what they're aiming for. It's a vague word. Like, it's a word that's غير منضبط. It doesn't have a precise meaning for them. It might have a precise meaning for us, or for me, or for you. But for that person, it doesn't have a precise meaning. So it's a vague thing that you never really ever achieve. You're just kind of like, got this vague idea. Like if you said, my aim is to memorize the Quran. And then my aim is to memorize, let's say for example, one key book in every subject. And then my aim is to memorize at least the ahadith that relate to rulings in Islam. And my aim is to study all of those with a teacher. That's measurable. I'm not saying you do it. Like at least it's something, you got a goal that you can measure. You can say, yes, I've done it. I've memorized half. I've done this much. I've sat with this teacher. Like you have this vague goal that you don't really know what it is. Or other people have a wrong idea of what this entails. And so they're aiming for something which is the wrong way. For example, issues with regard to their intention and so on. So in all of this, we want to start with the purification of the heart. Because the reality is that the place of knowledge is the heart. Allah Azza wa Jal said, بَلْ هُوَ آيَاتٌ بَيِّنَاتٌ فِي صُدُورِ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمِ وَمَا يَجْحَدُ بِآيَاتِنَا إِلَّا الظَّالِمُونَ. Rather, this Quran, they are ayat which are clearly explained in the hearts of those people who've been given knowledge. Notice Allah didn't describe the Quran as being in the hands of the people like a book. He didn't describe it as being in the masahif, in the mushaf, in the copies of the Quran. Rather, where it truly lives is in the heart, in what those people have memorized. And so if this heart is ready, generally if you think about the heart as a vessel, think of it as a vessel, like a container made of clear glass. When you put water in that and the glass is dirty, it's going to even make the water dirty. And you won't be able even to see. Could you imagine if you put something beautiful like honey and you put it into a dirty glass? You took something beautiful, something sweet, something amazing, and you put it into a dirty glass. So now you ruined it. And it's not a suitable place to put in the first place. Think about how the place you cook your food affects the taste of it. The reality is, the knowledge that you have, it has to have a clean heart. And a clean heart comes back to two fundamental things, because there are two diseases of the heart. These two diseases of the heart, Ibn al-Qayyim, rahimahullah ta'ala, he described them. He said, Al-Qalbu, the heart, it is affected by two sicknesses. يعترضه مرضان يتواردان عليه. Two sicknesses that affect it. If these two sicknesses become entrenched in it, كان هلاكه وموته, is going to be the destruction of that heart and the end of that heart, the death of that heart, if these two sicknesses become established in it. وهما مرض الشهوات ومرض الشبهات هذا أصل داء الخلق إلا من عافاه الله. He said there are two sicknesses. They affect the heart. If they become entrenched in the heart is going to be destroyed and it's going to die. They are the sicknesses of desires and the sicknesses of shubuhat. We're going to call them confusion, misconceptions and false ideas. This is the origin of the sickness of every single person. Unless Allah has given you al-afiyah, Allah has taken you out of it. So the first sickness is the sickness of desires. The reality is that this sickness is what? It's a sickness of a person who knows something about their religion, but they aren't practicing what they know. That person isn't practicing what they know. And so what is in that heart is full of desires. It's full of something which makes a person go against the knowledge they have. And ultimately the only benefit in knowledge is if you practice it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, أَمَّنْ هُوَ قَانِتٌ آنَاءَ اللَّيْلِ سَاجِدًا وَقَائِمًا يَحْذَرُ الْآخِرَةَ وَيَرْجُو رَحْمَةَ رَبِّهِ قُلْ هَلْ يَسْتَوِي الَّذِينَ يَعْلَمُونَ وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, as for the one who is obedient all throughout the night, standing and prostrating, fearing the akhirah and hoping for the mercy of his Lord, say are those who know equal to those who don't know. Look at what Allah described. He described knowledge as praying at night. He didn't describe knowledge by how many books are on the bookshelf. He described knowledge by how much you pray at night. So ultimately, if you are a person following your desires, you know something is wrong. You know it's not the right way of doing things, but that heart is full of these desires. Now I want you to pay attention. Ibn al-Qayyim said, it's when it becomes entrenched in the heart. This is important because it tells us that every one of us is going to have desires. Every one of us is going to make mistakes. Every one of us is going to fall short. But when those desires become entrenched in the heart, knowledge can't get inside. And that is when somebody consistently and continuously ignores the knowledge they have and doesn't practice it. In another narration, Ibn al-Qayyim said something amazing. And before we mention it, because I'll talk about it in relation to the other point, which is the issue of confusion and misconceptions. So this person has got wrong ideas about the knowledge they have. They don't have proper knowledge. They don't know what the right way to do things is. And that person becomes lost. And that person becomes confused. And that person ends up not being suitable for knowledge to enter their heart. Because of what? Because of the fact that it's full of wrong ideas and confusion and misconceptions. And it's full of things that twist the reality of what Islam is all about. Ibn al-Qayyim, he said something amazing. Well, I think this is a quote that is absolutely deserving of being given your attention. He said, rahimahullah ta'ala, وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ غَلِطَ فِي تَحْصِيلِ هَذَا الْمَطْلُوبَ الْمَحْبُوبَ النَّافِعِ إما في عدم تصوره ومعرفته وإما في عدم معرفة الطريق الموصلة إليه فهذان غلطان سببهما الجهل ويتخلص منهما بالعلم. He said most people went wrong in achieving this lofty and beloved goal of theirs, either because they can't picture what the goal is, or they don't know how to reach it. These two mistakes are because of ignorance, and they can be gotten rid of by seeking knowledge. And then he said, وَقَدْ يَحْصُلُ لَهُ العلم بالمطلوب والعلم بطريقته لكن في قلبه إرادات وشهوات تحول بينه وبين قصد هذا المطلوب النافع وسلوك طريقه. He said maybe a person knows what they're going for. I know I am aiming to be a person of knowledge. I know what that entails. I even know the path to go there. But the problem is that in my heart there are desires and there are, if you like, a will to do something which keeps on getting in the way of this goal of mine, or getting in the way of taking the path that I need to take. Until he said, وَهُوَ لَا يُمْكِنُهُ تركها وتقديم هذا المطلوب عليها إلا بأحد أمرين. It's not possible for this person to leave this and to prefer their goal over their desires except with two things. إما حب متعلق وإما فرق مزعج. He said either this person has to have a love that they have attached themselves, is driving them forward, or a fear that holds them back. He said فَيَكُونُ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ وَالدَّارُ الْآخِرَةُ وَالْجَنَّةُ وَنَعِيمُهَا أَحَبَّ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ هَذِهِ الشَّهَوَاتِ وَيَعْلَمُ أَنَّهُ لَا يُمْكِنُهُ الْجَمْعُ بَيْنَهُمَا فَيُؤْثِرُ أَعْلَى الْمَحْبُوبَيْنِ عَلَى أَدْنَاهُمَا. He said if the person has got Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Akhirah and Jannah and its pleasures more beloved than his desires, and he knows he can't have both. He knows he can't have Jannah as well as this desire of his. So in this example, his example is to be a student of knowledge, and he knows I can't be a student of knowledge along with this desire. So in the end, his love of Allah and the Dar al-Akhirah is what propels him to leave off that desire of his and put forward the goal that he's aiming for. He said, وَإِمَّا أَنْ يَحْصُلَ لَهُ عِلْمُ مَا يَتَرَتَّبُ عَلَى إِيثَارِ هَذِهِ الشَّهَوَاتِ من المخاوف والآلام التي ألمها أشد من ألم فوات هذه الشهوات وأبقى. He said either that or he has knowledge of the things that make him scared and the punishments and the pains that await the person who prefers the desires over this goal of theirs. And so he knows that this is more painful than the pain of leaving these desires behind. And I give you an example. The reality is, if you're not willing to put your knowledge over your desires, what will happen? You're going to have to live with the pain of being ignorant. The pain of not knowing the right thing and the wrong thing. The pain of not knowing what pleases Allah and what doesn't please Allah. And you will have to live with that for the rest of your life. That's why they said if you can't put up with the pain of seeking knowledge, you must put up with the pain of ignorance. So either you have a love that drives you forward or a fear that holds you back. Ibn al-Qayyim, he said, فَإِذَا تَمَكَّنَ مِنْ قَلْبِهِ هَذَانِ الْعِلْمَانِ. If he can get these two types of knowledge in his heart, it's going to lead to إِيثَارُ مَا يَنْبَغِي إِيثَارُهُ وَتَقْدِيمُهُ عَلَى مَا سِوَاهُ. You're going to end up prioritizing what deserves to be prioritized and leaving behind what deserves to be left behind. So if we can do this, this is the purification of the heart. Did you notice how Ibn al-Qayyim brought it all back to knowledge? Even desires, he said, if you have enough knowledge about Allah and the Rasul ﷺ and the Dar al-Akhirah and Jannah, that knowledge that you have will give you enough motivation to overcome the desires. وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. As for the one who is scared of standing before his Lord and prohibits his soul from what it desires, Jannah will be his destination. So he has knowledge about the Dar al-Akhirah. He has knowledge about the names and attributes of Allah, according to the two tafsir of the word maqam here. And so because of the knowledge he has about Allah and the Dar al-Akhirah, he overcomes his desires and stops them from getting in the way of his goal. So the correctness of the knowledge to get rid of the false ideas, and then striving against yourself and fighting against yourself to overcome the desires. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَنْظُرُ إِلَى صُوَرِكُمْ وَأَمْوَالِكُمْ وَلَكِنْ يَنْظُرُ إِلَى قُلُوبِكُمْ وَأَعْمَالِكُمْ. The hadith of Abi Hurairah radiyallahu anhu. Allah does not look at your physical forms and your wealth, but Allah looks at your hearts and your deeds. Allah looks at your hearts and your deeds. If this heart can be in a state where it is getting cleaned, where the person regularly turns back to Allah, makes tawbah, and puts the knowledge in that heart that protects by the permission of Allah from confusion, misguidance, and desires, now that heart is in a stage where it's ready to start appreciating the knowledge that comes. And here is where we have to talk about sincerity. We all know the famous hadith, the hadith of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu ta'ala an, that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَّا نَوَى. Every action will be judged according to your intentions, and everyone will have what they intended. We know from the first of the people to be thrown into the fire Yawm al-Qiyamah is a person who studied knowledge for Allah, and they recited the Quran. And when they were asked, they say to Allah, قَرَأْتُ فِيكَ الْقُرْآنِ, I read the Quran for you, except that they didn't. They lied. They learned knowledge so that people would say he's an alim, he's a scholar. And they recited the Quran so that people would say that he was a qari, وَقَدْ قِيلَ, and it was said. And then the person will be dragged onto their face and thrown into the fire before all of the people. So it is about rectifying our intention. What should our intention be? They asked Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah ta'ala, about this intention for seeking knowledge. He said, أن ينوي رفع الجهل عن نفسه وعن غيره, that he should intend to remove ignorance from himself, and he should intend to remove ignorance from others. Rather, it is as the poet said, اطلب العلم لوجه الله من غير مراءات ولا تباهي لتقصدوا أربعة قبل ابتداء تعلم لكي تفوزوا بالهدى أولها الخروج عن ضلال والثاني نفع خلق ذي الجلال والثالث الإحياء للعلوم والرابع العمل بالمعلوم. He said, seek knowledge for the face of Allah. Don't be one who seeks to show off and boast. You should have the intention of 4 things before you begin. Learn them so that you can be successful with guidance. The first is for you yourself to come out of misguidance. That's the first one. So the first intention is al-khuruju an dalali. I want to take myself out of being ignorant. I don't want to be from al-maghdubi alayhim, nor do I want to be from ad-dalin myself. So my first intention is to correct myself. And that's the first thing Imam Ahmad said. أَنْ يَنْوِيَ رَفْعَ الْجَهْلِ عَنْ نَفْسِهِ. I want to remove ignorance from myself. وَالثَّانِي نَفْعُ خَلْقِ ذِي الْجَلَالِ. You want to benefit Allah's creation. So I want to help myself. I want to help my brothers and sisters. لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. None of you truly believe until you love for your brother what you love for yourself. So I want to remove ignorance from me first of all. And then I want to help my brothers and sisters to do the same. And that was what Imam Ahmad said. The poet added two more. Al-Ihya'u lil-ulumi, bringing knowledge to life. Because it's true that there are many forms of knowledge that if we didn't study it and we don't teach and engage with it and commit ourselves, that knowledge will just die. The knowledge will just go away. Because people are focused on a very small amount of knowledge in their daily life, right? You know, in your day-to-day life, you're focused on just, you know, your few basic things that you need. وَالرَّابِعُ الْعَمَلُ بِالْمَعْلُومِ, to practice what it is that you know. That's all I want to do. I want to remove myself from ignorance. I want to help other people. I want to bring knowledge to life. And I want to act upon the knowledge that I have. If a person does this, and a person is keen for what will benefit them, and determined to take one step after another. And that's all it needs, ikhwani. We're not talking about one of the mistakes people have is that people think that seeking this knowledge has to be something extremely complex because they are looking so far ahead in the future. They see these great scholars of Islam and they say, أين الثرى من الثريا? And he wears the sand in comparison to the stars. How will I get up there? But that's the wrong way of thinking about it. That's the wrong idea. Instead, our job is just to take steps on the path. The path is anyway the path to Jannah. So it doesn't really matter to me in terms of that person I'm looking at. It only matters to me that I'm on the path. And that's why some of them said, it doesn't matter that you reach your destination. It only matters that you die while you're on the road. You die on the path. So it's not for a person to look and say, what has that person got? I can't achieve that. Your job is to put one foot in front of the other and just keep on going. Day after day, little bit after little bit. أَحَبُّ الْأَعْمَالِ إِلَى اللَّهِ أَدْوَمُهُ وَإِنْ قَلْ. The most beloved of the deeds to Allah are the most regular, even if they are small. Khwani, I'm going to give you an example. Memorizing the Quran. The Quran is around about 600 pages, a little bit more than 600 pages in the Mus'haf. Let's just say that you gave yourself 5 years. Or even if you gave yourself 6 years, no problem. Khwani, 6 years, 600 pages, that's 100 pages a year. The year is longer than 300 days, but let's call it 300 days, no problem. You're a third of a page plus revision time you have still, and in 6 years you finish it. Very, very small amount. Like, what's the problem? The problem is that I tried doing 2 pages yesterday and then I didn't remember the 2 pages and I had to go back again and then I did a page and then I left it off and then Ramadan started again and I did that same page again that I'd left off last time. Khwani, 1 line a day you would have done better than that. So the first thing we want to dispel is this idea of I need to memorize everything. I'm going to memorize the whole Quran in 6 months and then I'm going to memorize Sahih Bukhari the next 6 months and then I'm going to memorize Sahih Muslim in the next 6 months. Khwani, don't think like that. Think of baby steps every single day. That is going to be better for you than trying to have these huge goals that you don't really work towards. And that's why I want you to think about the difference between 2 things. I want you to think about the difference between at-tamanni and ulu al-himma. What's the difference between wishful thinking and aiming high? It's a tricky one. What's the difference between wishful thinking, which is blameworthy? We say, إِنَّ الْمُنَى رَأْسُ أَمْوَالِ الْمَفَالِيسِ. Dreams are the currency of the bankrupt. And if you don't have any money, what do? You sit down and say, I dream of this yacht that I'm going to buy and this car I'm going to have, and I've got 10 houses all over the world. Lekin akhi, you don't have £5 to rub together. Inna al-muna ra'su amwal al-mafalis. You just got what bankrupt people have, dreams. So what's the difference between that wishful thinking and between ulul himma, which is praiseworthy? إِذَا سَأَلْتُمُ اللَّهُ الْجَنَّةَ فَسَأَلُوهُ الْفِرْدَوْسِ. If you ask Allah for Jannah, ask Him for al-firdaus. What's the difference between them? The difference is one person is working towards that dream one step at a time, and the other one is sat right down with his eyes closed, just dreaming. Sahih, sat down with your eyes closed thinking, one day I'm going to be Hafiz of the Quran. Sat down with your eyes closed, one day I'm going to be a scholar. One day I'm going to be, I'm going to be the one who's teaching the people. Lekin you're sitting down with your eyes closed and you don't make any single step towards it. Lekin a person who says, look, I want to have knowledge for myself. I want to be able to help people. I want to be able to revive Islamic knowledge. I want to be able to practice it properly. And I'm just taking it one step at a time. Wallah, you see them after a year, you see them after 2 years, after 5 years, after 10 years. And you're like, how is this person? I want to give you some inspiration. You may have seen many great scholars of Islam who are very young. I'm not talking about, du'at and, people who give lectures in masajid. But honestly, min kibari ahl al-ilm, major scholars of Islam. And this person is like, 25 years old, 30 years old. How long have they actually been, realistically, how long have they been studying for? 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? And they reach this huge position. Does that not mean if you start now, we're not aiming for positions, like, and if you start now, is that not possible that you could in 20 years, in 10 years, in 15 years, reach that goal? It is. Lekin don't be the one who is sat dreaming, be the one who is working for it. Now I want to try to give you a roadmap of how to go about seeking this knowledge. And I'm going to start with 2 points, and then I'm going to give you the roadmap, and we're going to, inshallah ta'ala, conclude with that and then open to questions, inshallah. But it's quite a bit of discussion. The first thing I'm going to say to you is the statement of Imam Malik. سئل الإمام مالك رحمه الله تعالى عن طالب العلم فقال: حسن جميل ولكن انظر الذي يلزمك من حين تصبح إلى حين تمسي فالزمه. He said, he was asked about seeking knowledge. He said, seeking knowledge is beautiful and good, but look at what you will need from the morning until the evening and stick to it. This is my first piece of knowledge, that the thing you need to begin with is what you need in your daily life. That's got to be first. Before you start studying the advanced branches of knowledge, you need what you're going to need every single day. He was asked about talib al-ilm. Hasanun jameel is beautiful, lovely. But I am telling you, look at what you need in the morning until the evening, and now stick to it. You need to learn what you need in your daily life. The second thing is what we mentioned earlier on with regard to the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, بَلْ هُوَ آيَاتٌ بَيِّنَاتٌ فِي صُدُورِ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمِ. Knowledge only comes about when you bring together two things: memorization and understanding. And honestly, if you'll find, I'm telling you from someone who fell down that hole and is trying to get out of it, is that without really good memorization, that knowledge is not really going to help you as much as you think it would. And it's an excellent statement, the person who said, the only knowledge that really counts is the knowledge you take with you into the bathroom. Because you don't take your books into the bathroom, right? You leave them outside. You're not allowed to take your Islamic books into the bathroom. So the knowledge that really counts is the knowledge that goes with you when you enter the bathroom. And that is only what is in your heart. You're not allowed to take down anything else. That's why Allah described the Quran as being in the hearts of the people given knowledge. And we start with the memorization of the Quran. In fact, there are narrations from some of the great scholars of Islam, like Al-Awza'i, rahimahullah ta'ala, that they didn't consider memorizing the Quran to be seeking knowledge at all. They considered it to be a prerequisite of seeking knowledge. And before you seek knowledge, you should have memorized the Quran. And that's why when a small child would attend the durus, he would say, Ya ghulam, aqarat al-Quran. He would say, oh young man, have you memorized the Quran? Here, qarat means hafidh al-Quran. If he said yes, he would say, read the statement of Allah, yusikum Allahu fi awladikum. Read the ayat of inheritance from Surah An-Nisa. So if the boy would read them properly, he would let him stay in the class. Otherwise, he would say, it's not for you, this class, go back. Your first class is hifth al-Quran. Like, and there's something that was mentioned by some of the scholars, Ibn Jama'ah mentioned it, and if I'm not mistaken, any others mentioned it as well, which is that the situation for an adult is different from the situation of a child. When we have a small child, we're just going to put there that your only job is memorize the Quran. Don't come to my dars, don't sit here unless you memorize the Quran. And we're going to push them. Maybe in 5 years, even an average, child who's not, not that dedicated, and still they can finish the Quran easily. And what you learn when you're young is like writing on stone, like engraving rock. And what you learn when you're old is like writing on with water. It just evaporates. You don't see anything after that. So these young children, we put a lot of emphasis on hifth for them. Hifth. And less emphasis on understanding. Because for these young children, they have a massive capacity to memorize, but their understanding of a 7-year-old, of an 8-year-old, of a 5-year-old is less, but they learn a little bit. But with the young kids, your job is memorize. As an adult, you cannot do that. For 2 reasons. Number one, you do not have the ability, most of you, to memorize that quickly. Number 2, you need the fiqh, because you have to practice it. You are baligh. You've reached adulthood. You're responsible for your actions now. There's no way for us to say to you, it's okay, you can just be jahil for 3, 5, 6 years, just be ignorant, and then you can learn. You have to memorize and learn, memorize and learn, memorize and learn. That's why the Sahaba, how did they do it? The Sahaba, were they older or younger? The vast majority of the Sahaba were older when they accepted Islam. They never went beyond 10 ayat without learning. They memorized it. They learned the rulings from it, the meanings of it, the rulings from it, and they implemented it. And then they learned 10 more ayat. That is the way that we recommend for the adults, that you join memorization and understanding together. So you memorize, understand, and implement. Memorize, understand, and implement. Memorize, understand, and implement. Like that. Without that, you're really going to struggle. So you become a person that, everything has to be, it's just, if your book is there, you have knowledge. If your book is not there, you don't have knowledge. And that's not a praiseworthy situation to be in. At the same time, also, just memorizing, you don't want to become like the example of the donkey who carries books. The example of the donkey who carries books, the donkey doesn't understand anything in the books, he just carries them around. He can carry a lot of books, but you'll never get a fatwa out of the donkey. So the reality is that you also don't want to be like that. That's a terrible example. That's a bad example of a person to be. Someone who doesn't understand anything, but they can repeat things to you, but they don't understand. So we will only get that knowledge if we join between memorization and understanding. As a child, we're going to give lots of memorization and just a little bit of understanding. And as an adult, we're going to go equal, hand in hand. Maybe even as an adult, you might slightly tip on the side of understanding more according to your ability to memorize. Like if you're struggling, maybe you could only memorize, let's say, 1 or 2 lines a day. Instead of saying just understand 1 or 2 lines, maybe you could understand like a whole dars every day. but you could only memorize 1 or 2 lines, no problem. Eventually your memory will catch up, inshallah ta'ala. So now we come to what is beyond your daily tasks. What is something that is seeking knowledge in the religion of Islam properly, formally, and in detail. And wallahi, I have not seen anything better to summarize this path than 2 lines of poetry. These lines of poetry belong to Murtada al-Zabidi, the author of Taj al-Arus, in a poem that he called Alfiyatu Sanad, in which he said, فَمَا حَوَى الْغَايَةَ فِي أَلْفِ سَنَةٍ شخص فخذ من كل فن أحسن بحفظ متن جامع للراجح تأخذه على مفيد ناصح. This for me is the best short, summarized roadmap for seeking knowledge. It requires some explanation, but it's nice and short. You can memorize these, it's just 2 lines, that's it. Very easy. But he really summarized what is written in the books very beautifully. He said, فَمَا حَوَى الْغَايَةَ فِي أَلْفِ سَنَةٍ. The end of seeking knowledge cannot be attained in 1,000 years, shakhsun, by a person. So he's saying to you, look, if you go trying to read every book that has ever been written on Islam and study every topic and listen to every lecture, in 1,000 years you'll not finish. So then he tells you what is the solution. That's the problem. So far he's defined the problem. The problem is, it's not like I've just got 5 books I need to read. I mean, just look at the bookshelf. This is just a small bookshelf. How long will it take you to read all the books on the bookshelf over to my left? And that is not the biggest bookshelf in the world. Yani that's just like the key books that maybe you need all the time. How long will it take you to finish the books in that bookshelf? Now imagine a proper huge Islamic library with books as far as the eye can see. And then all the mashayikh and the lectures that are going on and all the videos that are made and the audio that's recorded and all the commentaries of the books that are made. How are you gonna in 1,000 years finish this? You can't. So now he gives you the solution. فَخُذْ مِنْ كُلِّ فَنٍ أَحْسَنَ. Take from every science the best of it. So what does that mean? First of all, it means divide Islam into sciences, funun. So if we look at Islam, Islam is not one massive big topic. Sahih, all the topics of Islam support each other. But Islam is not this huge big topic. It can be divided. For example, Aqeedah wa Usul al-Din, your creed, issues of Iman, the fundamental beliefs that make up the religion, that could be one subject. It's not one book. There are thousands of books written. Like it's one subject. Al-Furu' al-Fiqhiyya is one subject. The subsidiary matters of fiqh. Matters to do with how you make wudu and how do you pray and where do you put your hands in the prayer and things like that. Those are a subject. For example, the topic of fiqh sunnah, the fiqh that comes out of the hadith of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the rulings that you extract from the hadith, that is a subject. Likewise, the science of hadith, how to know what's authentic and not authentic, that's a subject. Usul al-fiqh, how do you extract rulings from the Quran and the Sunnah, is a subject. Seerah is a subject. The Arabic language with its different branches of grammar and morphology and eloquence is a subject. And even these subjects can be subdivided. Aqeedah, for example, can be divided into uluhiyyah and into Aqeedah amma or al-asma wa sifat. So you could divide Aqeedah into 3 separate subjects. You could divide it into matters related to worship, matters related to Allah's names and attributes, and matters related to general beliefs of the Muslim, and generally the pillars of Iman and so on. When you've got these different subjects, could be 10, could be 15, could be 20, could be more or less. And if you're interested in just having a look at what these subjects might look like, AMAU, the institute I teach in, without joining or anything like that, you can download the prospectus. So you can actually just on Google, you can just type in AMAU prospectus, and you can actually download. We have 7 or 8 pathways. I think it's going to come to 8. It's 7 is coming to 8, inshallah. Pathways. Each pathway is made up of several subjects, several sciences grouped together that support each other. So we have a pathway related to beliefs and the foundations of the religion. We have a pathway related to hadith. We have a pathway related to tafsir and the sciences of the Quran. We have a pathway related to seerah and history. We have a pathway related to personal and spiritual development. We have a pathway related to the Arabic language. And there are others, if I haven't mentioned, or that are coming, inshallah ta'ala. Within these pathways is not just one science. There's actually many sciences. So inside the pathway of fiqh, there is fiqh, there is usul al-fiqh, there is the issues of takhrij, al-furu' al-usul, how to implement how to take the general rules and implement them into specific cases. There are things like tabaqat al-madhab, the issue of the different people within the madhab and who they were. There's so many different subjects in there. There's so many subjects inside of there. Inside of hadith, we have the hadith itself. We have the science of hadith. We have al-jarh wa ta'deel, the approval and criticism of narrators. We have a takhrij, how do you research hadith and bring them and distill where each hadith came from. We have so many things. So what you're doing is breaking Islam down into these smaller sciences. And you need to take something from each one. And that's because although you are allowed to specialize, it is not praiseworthy for you to be ignorant of these different sciences. Islam all works together. If you ever see someone who's really knowledgeable in one science and ignorant of another, you can see the harm they do. For example, the person doesn't know much about hadith, what's authentic and what isn't, but they're very knowledgeable about fiqh. You see them basing their fatwa upon weak hadith, because the person doesn't have a good skill in knowing which hadith is authentic and which hadith is not authentic. Now, I'm not saying to be an expert in everything. Very few people, some people in the history of Islam were experts in everything. But it's not easy to be an expert in everything. But at least to have a basic knowledge of all of the different sciences of Islam. So this shows you the mistake of just watching random videos on YouTube. You're not going to get a basic knowledge in each area. So if I ask you about hadith, you should have some good knowledge about it. If I ask you about what makes a hadith authentic, you should have some good knowledge about it. If I ask you about what do commands indicate within the Quran and Sunnah, from the topics of usul fiqh, what do the words mean? You should have a good knowledge about it. If I ask you about the rules of fiqh, you should have a good knowledge about it. If I ask you about the Arabic language, the grammar, the morphology, or the eloquence of it, you should have a little bit of knowledge about that as well. If I ask you about seerah, you can answer. If I ask you about history, you know. If I ask you about tafsir of the Quran, you know it. If I ask you about the gathering of the mushaf and the sciences of the Quran, you know about that. Not an expert. We're not yet there. We're not in the area of expert. But just to have a good background in every single science of Islam. To be competent in each one. But then he said something else. فَخُذْ مِنْ كُلِّ فَنٍّ أَحْسَنَ. You have to take the best out of each science. There's no doubt that there have been hundreds of books written on every topic. So what am I going to do? I'm not going to take all of them. I want one of my teachers, someone who has achieved a great deal of knowledge, to teach me, Shaykh, which are the books I should take that will quickly get me to my goal. I don't have time to waste. I don't know how long Allah has written for me in this earth. I have no time to waste. Shaykh, give me 3 books that will suffice me in this topic. 1, 2, 3. Could be. For example, somebody says, I want to study the science of hadith. What's authentic and what's not authentic. Just give me the best. Don't give me all this from here and here and here. I'm going to say very simple. You're going to start with Nukhbat al-Fikr by Al-Hafidh ibn Hajar rahimahullah ta'ala. After that, you're going to take Ikhtisar Ulum al-Hadith Ibn Kathir. And after that, inshaAllah ta'ala, you're going to take Alfiyat al-Iraqi and Fath al-Mughith. 3 books. Inshallah ta'ala, 3 hard books, that's not easy. Like you finish it, you're going to be very, very strong in that science. You're not an expert. You didn't become Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala. Like you became somebody who knows what they're talking about when it comes to hadith. In 3 books. But that 3 books would take you time to study. You'll not study it in one day. The same can be said in many other sciences, maybe a few more, few less. That's the value of a madhab, al-madhab al-fiqhi. That the madhab in fiqh just gives you, look, this book 1, book 2, book 3, book 4, book 5, khalas, you're done. That's what it is. So every madhab has that. Whether it's the Hanbali madhab or the Shafi'i madhab, I did deliberately start with Hanbali madhab. Shafi'i madhab or the Maliki madhab or the Hanafi madhab, they have their books 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 done. You're looking to finish these books quickly. You're looking to get the main information you need and move on. You don't have time. Sahih, if you want to become an expert, there's hundreds of other books you're going to read on individual topics and specific types of ibadat, and you're going to read on books of fatawa. But I just want to know quickly, look, I need to finish. I've got no time. Give me the best. Book 1, book 2, book 3, book 4. Done. That's what you want to do. Then you ask about, for example, tafsir. And again, a person says, no problem. We're going to tell you, this is how you're going to do tafsir. You're going to start with a summarized book of tafsir, which is really just meanings. Maybe if you have a teacher, something like Tafsir al-Jalalain, if you have a teacher, but you need a teacher for it really, because it has some issues in it. Like in something like that. You're then going to move on to the summary of Tafsir ibn Kathir. And then after that, you're going to move on to either you're going to take Ibn Kathir in full, but better you take Tafsir al-Tabari with Ibn Kathir in the footnotes. It's going to take you time. Tafsir al-Tabari is over there somewhere. It's not a small book. Like when a person finishes it, you know what you're talking about. You've got a good, solid background. And all the scholars are going to give you slightly different variations of books. Don't worry about it. Some people are going to say, like I had 2 mashayikh in tafsir. One of them said, you have to finish with Tafsir al-Tabari. One of them said, you must not include Tafsir al-Tabari. One of them said, that should be the final book. One of them said, don't make it the final, don't make it one of the books. It's too complicated. So each one has their own variation of which books to start, which books to finish. But it's very simple. Book 1, book 2, book 3, book 4, whatever it is. There might be 5, there might be 4, there might be 3. You finish them, you know them well, you move on. I want to stress, you didn't become an expert. You didn't become a great scholar of Islam. You just became somebody who has got a really good, basic, firm understanding of the topic. Because knowledge goes through marahil, phases. The first phase of knowledge is at-ta'sis. The first phase of knowledge is, I just want to understand what am I talking about. So for example, if you were to take something like Nukhbat al-Fikr in Mustalah al-Hadith, you finish that, you're going to have a good idea of what is this topic about. Then you move on to a marhala which some of them call a tadleel. I want to start learning the evidences for what I've taken. I want to kind of dive in a little bit deeper. So in the first level, you're just being told, this is the answer, move on. This is the answer, move on. It's like in fiqh, you're being told, right? This is what you do with your hands, this is what you do, this is when you say Allahu Akbar, this breaks your wudu, this doesn't break your wudu. You're just being told. In a second level, you start to get evidences for what you say. In a third level, you move up to a level of, some of them might call it the level of comparison or comparative understanding. And this issue of muqarana, looking between different views. مَعْرِفَةُ مَا لَكَ وَمَا عَلَيْكَ, knowing what is for you and what is against you. Knowing what's on my side and what's against me. Because at the end of the day, how can you understand any mas'ala in any area of Islam unless you know what's on your side and what's against you? It amazes me, brothers who talk about things. I sometimes see people say, my view is that ... My view is that the niqab is fard. My view is that the niqab is recommended. Taib, akhi, that view is based on what? This is where it falls down. It's based on what I read last week on the website. La ya Shaykh, the knowledge is not like that. مَعْرِفَةُ مَا لَكَ وَمَا عَلَيْكَ. You have to reach a level where you know what do you have with you, what's your argument, and what's the other person's argument. And then you move into a level of at-tahrir, of selecting, of choosing which one is stronger. Of, if you like, polishing your views and selecting certain views over others. And then you reach the level of at-takhassus, the level of specialization and becoming an expert. So just here we're talking about at least covering the level of at-ta'sis and at-tadleel, at least. And then starting to go into that area of ikhtilaf and different views as you get towards the later books that we're talking about. Book 1, Book 2, Book 3. Book 1, just get the idea what you're talking about. Book 2, get the daleel. Book 3, understand the differences of opinion. And this is why you have a danger if you start with the differences of opinion first. You drown. I've seen people like that. We used to see in the Jami'ah, people come in the university. So I see the brother next time, he doesn't come to the masjid anymore. I say, Akhi, you're not coming to the masjid anymore. And I see him, he's cut off his beard and he shaved his beard and he stopped coming to the masjid. I say, Akhi, what happened? He said, well, I've seen there's ikhtilaf on the issue. Sahih. I'm telling you now, there's no bigger marketplace in the world than fatwa shopping. And you can get any fatwa you want. Akhi, open Google now today, you'll get a fatwa for any single thing you want. And Sahih, what he's saying, he's talking about something Sahih. There's going to be somebody who said you don't have to pray in the Jama'ah. There are other people who define the beard like this or like that. Like if this is your beginning, the problem is he was at the stage of wanting to learn the basics and he started to take the advanced issues. So this person, we say to them, طَعَامُ الْكِبَارِ صُمُّ الصِّغَارِ. The food of the old is poison for the young. Try feeding a little baby the food you eat every day. The little baby would die. So you can't go into these books of ikhtilaf and different views and different opinions until you've understood the basics. In everything, it's the same in hadith, it's the same in fiqh, it's the same in tafsir. It's the same thing, you read tafsir, there's 12 opinions about the ayah. And you're like looking, I don't know which one opinion is which. But if you learn the basics first, then you learn your evidences, then you learn the differences of opinion, then you select the opinion which is the stronger one. All of that is with what? This now we come to the second part. بِحِفْظِ مَتْنٍ جَامِعٍ لِلرَّاجِحِ تَأْخُذُهُ عَلَى مُفِيدٍ نَاصِحِ. You're going to memorize a text that gathers together that which is superior. So you're not just going to read these books. You're going to memorize certain things. Now bear in mind, the book you read and the book you memorize may not be the same. The teacher will advise you, for example, read this book and memorize this one. We gave the example of Alfiyat al-Iraqi. Alfiyat al-Iraqi is a poem you memorize and then you study the explanation of it from the book Fath al-Mughith. So you're reading, you're not memorizing Fath al-Mughith unless you Feel like it? It's a bit long. It's like that. So if you're not memorizing that, but you're memorizing the poem that the book explains. It's like you might memorize a hadith from Sahih al-Bukhari and read the explanation from Fath al-Bari. Fath al-Bari is like this. You're not memorizing Fath al-Bari. You're memorizing the hadith from Sahih al-Bukhari and you're reading the explanation of it from Fath al-Bari, for example. So now your teacher is going to recommend for you things to memorize and things to study. And they're going to go hand in hand. So you're memorizing and you're studying something which is explaining what you're memorizing. What's the benefit? You're memorizing something actually very small. It's not huge. I'll give you an example. The Alfiyat, which is probably the biggest thing you memorize, most of you. Unless you feel like Nuniyat ibn al-Qayyim. One day, 4,000 something lines. Normally, you're memorizing, the maximum you memorize in each science is around about 1,000 lines, mostly. There are some exceptions to it. There might be some exceptions like tafsir and things like that. But you typically memorize 1,000 lines, roughly, in each science. That 1,000 lines you memorize, how big is it? As an example, if we take a 1,000-line poetry, normally if you listen to it being recited, it's about an hour and a half long. How long is Surah Al-Baqarah if you listen to it being recited? It's about there or thereabouts. So it's basically, you're going to say that it's actually, that line is similar to memorizing Surah Al-Baqarah. So if you've memorized the whole Quran, which is we're talking about the goal, right? The whole Quran, then it's not difficult for you to add to that the likes of Surah Al-Baqarah in 5 or 6 major things, maybe seerah, maybe usul al-fiqh, mustalah al-hadith, aqidah. You got like some key points memorized. I'm not saying that's your first day, because that doesn't make sense, right? That's at the end. At the beginning, maybe here and there, a few pages, a couple of ayat, some evidences, and you go like that. Now it's very important that you memorize the right thing. And the right thing means 2 things. First of all, the book you memorize, or this poem, it could be poem or it could be prose. I don't personally think there's any issue with either. Some people like memorizing poetry, some people like memorizing just plain text. For me, I cannot memorize plain text. I find it very hard. Poetry, I'm okay, I can memorize poetry, but I can't memorize plain text. So for me, anytime someone says to me, memorize the text, I say, Sheikh, is there a poem for it? Because I just give me a poem, I'll memorize it. Because it rhymes and it's easy to remember and stuff like that. But the one thing you want it to be is it's got to be comprehensive. There's no point in memorizing something that doesn't really cover the topic. The second thing is it should contain knowledge which is actually reasonably correct. I don't say perfect. There's nothing perfect except the Quran. But it should contain knowledge that is mostly correct. And for that reason, personally, I'm against memorizing in Mustalah al-Hadith al-Bayquniyya, personally. Because of this issue. Because you're going to see so many times where the author went against what the later scholars settled upon. So you're basically memorizing something which is not quote-unquote wrong. You're memorizing something which is not the right answer. And that's a big waste of time. You're memorizing something which is not necessarily the correct answer on the topic. Sahih, Bayquniyya, you could memorize it, it's small, and then you could learn that this and this and this and this is different. But do you see the problem? You're learning something only to think that this is learn this, but that's not right. Learn this, but that's not right. That wastes your time. You want to select a text which generally is correct. You can have some mistakes in it, but more or less the text is considered to be correct. And it's considered to be a standard. This is the other problem. I'll tell you another problem. Kulliyat al-Hadith. We were told to memorize Al-Muharrar by Ibn Abd al-Hadi. Amazing book. Al-Muharrar fil Hadith by Ibn Abd al-Hadi, rahimahullah ta'ala. Amazing book. But it has one massive problem. It's just not as famous as Bulugh al-Maram. And that is a big problem, because you go to the bookstore and say, right, I've memorized Al-Muharrar. show me the explanations. And the guy is like, we don't have any. Like, okay, can I order them? He's like, not really. And you might find one explanation or two here and there. Do you get what I'm saying? I mean, this is a book, we had to memorize it, included hadith. It's a book of hadith of rulings. Amazing book. But the problem is when you go to find the explanation of it, you can't find except one or two here and there. Like in Bulugh al-Maram, you can fill the whole bookshelf with explanations of Bulugh al-Maram. You can find any sheikh in any town, in any city, in any country teaching that book. So it became widely accepted, which is why I would say to you, don't memorize Al-Muharrar fil Hadith. Even though I believe it's personally it's better than Bulugh al-Maram in terms of the quality of hadith, the critique of hadith and stuff like that. But don't memorize it because ultimately you're making things hard for yourself. You're not memorizing the standard. Memorize the book that is the standard. Even if it's a baby book, memorize the standard. Don't go off and memorize something weird. Memorize the standard. Study standard books. Books that are tried and tested. Books that have been here for 500, 600 years. People have been learning them. Go with what is the standard. Go with what is tried and tested. Ulama came out, scholar after scholar after scholar from these books. Why you want to go to something different and try something that came out last week? Stick to what is established. تَأْخُذُهُ عَلَى مُفِيدٍ نَاصِحٍ. And this is the last part. You take this book, these books in every science. Who do you take them from? You take them from someone who is qualified and someone who cares about you. Two things they have to have. They're qualified to teach you the book. That's the first thing. There's no point in learning from someone who doesn't know. You want to learn from someone who's done it, who's achieved it. You don't want to learn from someone who hasn't achieved it. The second thing is you want to learn from someone who truly, genuinely, sincerely wants good for you. So they're not just going to give you knowledge, they're going to give you tarbiyah, they're going to teach you manners, they're going to teach you behavior, they're going to teach you how to practice that knowledge. How to be the person that your goal is to be. And so these are just two lines, very easy to learn. But ultimately we understood, break down the sciences of Islam into sub-sciences. If you want to see all the sub-sciences that we broke it down into, you can get the AMAU prospectus. You can read all the way that we broke it down. But every teacher will have a different way. We broke it down like that. The reason we put it into pathways is because we didn't want someone to take one topic and leave another one. So we wanted to kind of force them to take the topics together. But otherwise, break it into sciences. Don't try to read everything. Focus yourself on 2, 3, 4 books that are well known, that are established, that are trusted, that are tried and tested, that are the best that has ever been written on that field. Memorize what your teacher tells you to memorize, even if it is only a small bit to begin with, and then go to a bigger one and a bigger one. And take that knowledge from someone who's qualified and someone who's going to nurture you and educate you and support you in that journey. If you do this, there is no reason, and after the help of Allah, that you won't be able to achieve your goal. As much as you don't do this is as much as you won't achieve the goal. That's how it is. For example, a person says, I'm doing it, but it's just, I'm doing it by myself. I don't have a teacher. We say, yeah, you'll achieve something, inshallah. Ultimately, it would just be faster and easier and better for you if you had a teacher, honestly. Someone says, I have a teacher, but I'm just, I attend some classes, but not others. You say, okay, that means you're not going to get the same as that other person is going to get. There's one last point that I'm going to talk about and then I'm going to finish. And that is consolidating your knowledge. Because at the end, even this is too much. What I mean is, even at the end of this journey, there's too many books. If you said 4 books in every science, or let's say 3. Let's just say you had 15 sciences. That's 45 books. That's a lot of books to keep in your head. What I would recommend you do beyond that is to consolidate your knowledge onto one book in every science. Usually the last book you study, but not always. So you're going to say, we said in Mustalah al-Hadith, for example, Nukhbatul Fikr, Ikhtisar Ulum al-Hadith, and Alfiyat al-Iraqi. In reality, all the knowledge from the first two books can be put onto the last one. And you can actually gather all the knowledge you've got from those two books and write it in the margins of the last book that you study. And that becomes the book that if the house is on fire, you would take it. Yeah, that becomes my book. So when people ask me to teach Nukhbatul Fikr, for example, I'm teaching it, but my notes are all on Alfiyat al-Iraqi. That's where all my notes are. They're on that poem. All the notes are there. Those are the ones I remember. Those are the ones I revise. And the rest of it, whenever I come to it, I just, connect one to the other. The same thing you can do in Aqeedah, for example, that in Uluhiyya, in the issue of worshipping Allah, all of your notes, you bring it onto Kitab al-Tawheed. Everything you've learned in all the other books, consolidate it onto something like Fath al-Majid, the explanation of Kitab al-Tawheed. So you've written your extra notes there, the extra benefits you learned from all the other books onto one book. In the issue of general Aqeedah, maybe At-Tahawiyah, you've taken all of the notes from your other books and brought it onto Al-Aqeedah Al-Tahawiyah. So now, instead of having 45 books, maybe you have 15 to 20 books. Because you might not get away with one in every science, but maybe you have 15 to 20 books. Those 15 to 20 books, you know them inside and outside, up and down. Even you get to learn where's the full stops and the commas. You know everything you learn about it. And that is not the end of your journey. That is just having a strong platform to be able to build on. Then you go and specialize, you look at detailed issues, you select different views, you go back and study what the scholars said, you look at ikhtilaf, the differences of opinion, and which is the stronger view, and you grow in knowledge as time goes on. But to begin with, you need a solid foundation. It needs to be in every science of Islam. And to begin with, it's very simple. I'm talking about 1,000 lines. I'm talking about to begin with, it's 2 pages, 3 pages in every science. If you just took the equivalent of 100 lines of poetry in every science, you'd be better than most people. That's the truth. 100 lines of poetry is, we're talking about, maybe 5 pages. If you just took that in every science and knew it really well, wallahi, you'd be better than a lot of people. No word of Allah, you would really, I'm not joking with you, you would be better than a lot of people if you just knew 100 lines in every science. But they have to be solid and they have to be established, and you learn them from your teacher well. Wallah, you can do so much. And that's why we're not talking about a lifetime here. We're talking about people who did this inside of 10 years, inside of 15 years. They finished the Quran, they finished learning each science, and then memorizing hadith is a big topic, because memorizing hadith can go for a long time, but at least they memorized, the core hadith, the main hadith of ahkam and everything. That person, anytime you ask them to teach, they teach. Anytime you ask them to give a khutbah, the khutbah is ready in the head automatically. Anytime you ask them to lead the salah, they lead the salah. You ask them to give a little reminder afterwards, they know it. They remove the ignorance from themselves and other people. And then later on, if Allah gives you success to be able to journey further through that, nurun ala nur. It's light upon light. That is what Allah Azza wa Jal made easy for me to mention. I will open up the option for any questions. What I will do is, I did say also, I think, do we have sisters listening also as well? Okay, I wanted to give the same option for the Slido, but I don't know if I can do it or not. Let's try. Because I like it, because I can save the questions for later. Let me see if I can. But you can ask me these as well, inshallah. Okay, let me just give people the details for the Slido, and then after that people can ask, inshallah. So Slido is a website that lets you ask questions using your phone, and it lets people vote on the questions that are important to them. You can find it at slido.com, and they will ask you for a code. We'll give the same code for today's class, which is 618 2650. 618 2650. I'll say it one more time. This is the code for today's class. 618 2650. If you type that code in, you can ask questions, inshallah ta'ala. I don't mind from the brothers, I take them from here, but it's just nice to have the questions written down, because a lot of people sometimes have questions, and then later on, even if we don't get to answer them now, we can answer them later, inshallah ta'ala. So first of all, the questions that were on the stream, inshallah, tell me those, first of all.
Should a person start from Surah Al-Baqarah to Nas al-Tafsir, or start from Surah Al-Nas al-Baqarah?
In tafsir, in hifz, I think the person should start from Surah Al-Nas to Surah Al-Baqarah. Tafsir, I've seen mashayikh do both, and I don't even know which one I prefer. To be honest, the tafsir of Juz Amma is harder than the tafsir at the beginning of the Quran, because the tafsir of Juz Amma, the ayat are very small and there's lots of meanings in them. So I don't mind if you start either, whatever your teacher teaches you to do, and I don't mind either of them. Like, I would start with selected surahs like Surah Al-Fatiha, Ayat Al-Kursi, the last 3 surahs of the Quran first, and then maybe go from Baqarah to Surah Al-Nas in tafsir. Me personally, the tafsir that I consolidate upon is Ibn Kathir. That's what I feel like. I put it upon Al-Misbah Al-Munir, the summary of Ibn Kathir. That's where I find it better. Like, to me, that's where I can focus on, is the summary of Ibn Kathir. So another one?
Yeah, I don't know, this one's a bit general, so I don't know if you want to give it.
Bismillah, we'll try, inshallah.
How to stop procrastinating.
Yeah, procrastinating when seeking knowledge is very, very big problem. We call this tasweef. Sawfa wa sawfa wa sawfa. I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it. I think the biggest problem with procrastination is having too big of a task at once. Take this from someone who suffers from, I suffer from this all the time. But I read once that psychologically the problem is that people make too big of a task at once. So when your task at once is, I have to finish this book, it's a very big task. But like, listen to 10 minutes of the lecture is a small task. So make the tasks very, very small, and concentrate on just doing a small part of the task every day, rather than trying to have these huge tasks. You say, oh, tomorrow I'll just do it, tomorrow I'll do it. Make your tasks very, very small. And ask the help of Allah, no doubt. Did you have another one?
Yeah, but I don't know.
If it comes on here, don't worry, I'll take from the brothers in the room as well.
Could you give 3 books to read from Fiqh, Aqidah, Hadith and Tafsir?
Fiqh, Aqidah, Hadith and Tafsir. Okay, in a very beginner's level. Fiqh is going to be dependent upon the madhab, no doubt. So whatever madhab your teacher is teaching, that's the book you're going to start with. If it's al-madhab al-Shafi'i, which is what we teach in AMAU, then it's going to be Matan Abi Shuja' to start with, inshallah. If it is Hanbali fiqh, maybe Akhsar al-Mukhtasarat to start with, inshallah. I'm only telling these in Arabic. Don't ask me about English. What's published, what's not published, what's translated. I do not know anything about that stuff. Okay, in Aqidah, no doubt for me, Kitab al-Tawheed, no doubt about it. And if we're talking about Asma' al-Sifat, maybe Al-Wasitiyah, Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah ta'ala. If we're talking about Hadith, the 40 Hadith of Imam al-Nawawi, definitely. With the explanation of Ibn Rajab and the extra Hadith of Ibn Rajab. Jami' al-Ulum wal-Hikam. That's also available in English, I know that. And What else was there? What else do we have? Tafsir. Tafsir, for a person without a teacher, I would advise you to take Tafsir al-Sa'di. Tafsir al-Sa'di, rahimahullah ta'ala. If you have a teacher teaching you, I would advise Al-Misbah al-Munir, the summary of Tafsir ibn Kathir. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Okay, it's a good question here. What about if someone has no teacher in person but learns online? So that I don't see a problem in learning online, but I don't want you to think that online replaces having a physical teacher. Where do you struggle online? You struggle with the tarbiyah aspect, the discipline aspect, right? The etiquettes and mannerisms. Because your teacher doesn't know how you're sitting in the class, doesn't know if you're lying down, if you're fast asleep, so that's where you struggle. A little bit of discipline. But online has opened up a huge blessing. So I think it's very important. And you don't always find a teacher teaching everything you want to know right now. But online, inshallah ta'ala, you can find. So for me, I think, I'm obviously a teacher. I teach online. That's my job. So I'm obviously in favor of it. But I actually believe that as much as you can, you find people in person. But where you can't, then online is there to fill the gaps, inshallah ta'ala. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Where can I get a good female teacher? This again is where the online space really comes into play. Finding a good female teacher is not easy to find because normally you wouldn't expect that person to have such a high profile. But there's two options. One is to attend the classes with the brothers and the male teacher, and the sisters attend. But to have a direct female teacher, I think that online is an excellent opportunity. That's where you have a chance to find teachers. You can find them abroad and so on, and you communicate with them, maybe like video calling and stuff like that. You do have an option for that. And it's like murasala, it's like writing to your sheikh. It's a valid means of study. Which book to study for day-to-day ibadah? So I'm going to give you two books. I'm going to say that day-to-day ibadah is really an issue of fiqh, to be honest. Like day-to-day ibadah is an issue of fiqh. So a good book of fiqh, again, it depends on what your teacher is teaching, but if you have something to read by yourself, a summary of Islamic jurisprudence by Sheikh Salih al-Fawzan is very good, hafidhullah ta'ala. It's in 2 volumes in English, it's very good. That could be a good book just to get your daily, the fiqh that you need in your daily life. But I also very much like the book of Sheikh bin Baz, rahimahullah ta'ala, which is the book of basic lessons for every Muslim. It's very, very good. الدروس المهمة لعامة الأمة. Important lessons for every Muslim. It's very, very good. It's a very good day-to-day book. And then also, no doubt, Riyadh al-Salihin for the virtue of doing good deeds. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. If you want to give me one more, then I want to see from the brothers as well. I'm going to come to you, inshallah.
A question from a sister. This is a question for reverts. What is the best way to go for knowledge once one is able to read Arabic but still unable to understand it?
So a revert who's able to read Arabic but struggling to understand it still. I think for reverts, I have my methodology is to get them to a stage where they feel comfortable to join the rest of the Muslims who are learning. And once they reach that stage, I would not recommend anything different for them. I would recommend the same thing we talked about today. But I just recommend getting them up to the stage where they feel comfortable, the way that you guys sitting in front of me here in the masjid feel comfortable. And that, inshallah ta'ala, what I have is I do have a revert course that does that, inshallah. It's a free course and it is at the IIC Academy, Islamic Information Center Academy in Dubai. It's online. So what you do is you type into Google Islamic Information Center Academy Dubai, and there's a revert course. It takes about a year to finish it. And the idea is just to get you to the stage where you are now ready to kind of sit with the rest of the Muslims in the class and benefit the same way they benefit, and then take the same way that they take, inshallah ta'ala. Someone asked a question, is it best to start with mutun of talab al-ilm? Like, in other words, a guide of how to seek knowledge, definitely. So there are two books that I believe you cannot do without. And after the help of Allah Azza wa Jal, there are two books in how to seek knowledge. I don't think you can leave either of them. One is the book Ta'zeem al-Ilm by Sheikh Salih al-Usaymi, Hafidhahullah Ta'ala. And the other one is the book Hilyatu Talib al-Ilm by Sheikh Bakr Abu Zayd, Rahimahullah Ta'ala. Both of them are taught at AMU. I personally used to think maybe you can do with Ta'zeem al-Ilm and leave al-Hilya, but to be honest, since I started teaching al-Hilya, I believe you need them both. And al-Hilya is translated into English, and Ta'zeem al-Ilm is also translated into English as well, both of them. So one is called Revering Knowledge by Sheikh Salih al-Usaymi, and one of them is called Etiquettes of Seeking Knowledge by Sheikh Bakr Abu Zayd, Rahimahullah Ta'ala. Another good question here, we'll take this one, then I'll go to the brother. Do you think there's an issue in wanting to learn Arabic language before properly studying the books? Arabic language, I see it the same like the issue of Quran. You can't dedicate 5-6 years to learning Arabic and then know nothing. So you learn Arabic with your studies as you're going. But one thing I believe every teacher should do is always try to give your quotes and evidences in Arabic. I think most of them today, we gave the quotes and evidences in Arabic. Why did we bother? I mean, why not? It would have been faster if we just gave it in English. But at the end of the day, if you go back to this video later on and you know the Arabic language, we want you to be able to take directly, not to take the translation. Because I might have translated incorrectly, I might have misquoted something. But if I gave you the Arabic, now you can actually find the Arabic directly and benefit from it directly. Whereas if I just gave you the English, you won't actually be able to benefit from it a year later, because you've learned Arabic and there's no benefit in the English anymore. So what we always do is try to give as much as Arabic as we can, as well as English along with it, inshallah. The brother had a question. Allah bless you, Habib. Wassalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Is it acceptable? So, as a brother, you've tasted the sweetness of knowledge. You've memorized. You even brought your son, you start homeschooling, you smash that desire with him. It's sweet. Because of the reality of this country, you sort of put that aside with the intention of grinding and striving to move to a different country where it could be said that sweetness is easier to attain than being in this country. Is it acceptable to sacrifice that, daily knowledge with the intention of wanting to better yourself and your children as well?
It's a beautiful question, wallahi, and you worded it in a beautiful way as well. May Allah bless you. I'm not going to be able to word it as well as the brother did, but I'm just going to give you the khulasa, the summary of it, is that a person wants to make hijrah, so they leave some of this, the sweetness of seeking knowledge in order to prioritize that issue of working hard to be able to get the hijrah. While it's a very praiseworthy thing to want to make hijrah, that's a beautiful thing. And it's a beautiful thing to work hard to want to get it. At the same time, I would suggest that we shouldn't sacrifice the seeking of knowledge because of 2 or 3 things. The first thing is that knowledge itself brings blessings. It brings blessings to you in your actions. It corrects for you your work, even the barakah in your wealth that comes from having knowledge and implementing it. وَلَوْ أَنَّ أَهْلَ الْقُرَىٰ آمَنُوا وَاتَّقَوْا لَفَتَحْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ بَرَكَاتٍ مِّنَ السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ. If only the people of the towns had iman and taqwa, we would have opened for them barakah from the heavens and the earth. The second thing is, we don't know when that hijrah will take place. It could be that a person chases and works and works and works, and it might be 2 years, it might be 5 years, it might be 10 years. And the other thing is, if we don't build the habits here, we're not going to have the habits there. Khwani, I live in Dubai most of my year, and I see so many brothers making hijrah. And honestly, the vast majority, if they didn't have good habits, they just go into the dunya over there. And they didn't have the habits of learning. At the same time, I'm not saying dedicate 100% to your learning and then leave that hijrah aside. But I'm saying that work what you need to do But give that time for knowledge so that you have those habits that are actually going to benefit you in that hijrah when it happens, inshaAllah ta'ala. So it's a balance between the two. And from this is the action of Umar, radiallahu anhu, when he said, I used to work one day and my neighbor used to work one day. So they used to exchange days. One of us would go to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and study, and the other one would go and work. And then they would swap. And each one would tell the other one what he learnt. Now look at that, at the sense that both of them are working hard. They have to give up, they're working, both of them are working effectively, 3-4 days out of the week. They're working hard, long days. And at the end of the day, they're still studying. But they're doing that so they can have a day with the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to learn. So they balance between their work. Otherwise, a person might work and work and work and never ever get the sweetness of knowledge that they actually wanted to get. So it's got to be a balance. And with that balance comes barakah, inshallah. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. We'll go for it.
Assalamu alaikum. It's very nice to see you.
Allah bless you.
We're very blessed. I have this question. Actually, I've been asked often by non-Muslims, and obviously you reverted, when you were at a very young age, and I'm sure you may have found this in the beginning, that often when a person comes to Islam, obviously they're given the Shahada, we're really good at selling the Deen. The main problem is how does a person, or where does a person go rather, to acquire knowledge as to what is cultural practices, what is Islam, what is superstition, or what is people's thinking, and what is actually Quran and Sunnah. Because often a lot of the non-Muslims, they become Muslims, alhamdulillah, but then they find it difficult to sieve, through what is Islam and what is just people doing stuff, As I say, it's always good to see Islam first, then the Muslims.
It's very true. Wallahi, I went through that same thing when I was younger. This issue of having so many different groups, different opinions, different practices. Is it Islam? Is it cultural? Is it from the Sunnah? Is it not? Is it correct? Differences of opinion. And as we said, it's not right for a student to learn differences of opinion. First of all, it's even more harmful for a new Muslim to come into Islam and see 5 different opinions. I've seen, people, the brother goes to make wudu and they're like, Akhi, you're doing it wrong. You need to do it like this. Then he changes, then another brother comes and says, Akhi, you're doing it wrong. And the person just got so confused by all the different opinions. In the end, maybe he says, I'm not going to do it now. Because he got very confused. So my new Muslim course, I focused at the very beginning, the very first lesson or second lesson is about dealing with differences of opinion and how to sift through what is wrong and what is right. And also to understand for a new Muslim that you've got to have an anchor point. You've got to have someone that you trust. You've got to have a teacher you trust. Because you can't have no anchor point at all. Like anybody could possibly be right about anything. Like it's very hard. So we say for the new Muslim, have one person that you believe is the most knowledgeable person you have access to at that time. And for now, just for now, let that person filter for you. Now someone might say, well, that's not ideal. We should be going to the Quran and Sunnah, no doubt. But the reality is the Quran and Sunnah is not achievable for that person at that moment. That person wouldn't know an ayah if it's from the Quran or not from the Quran. So we say, get yourself attached to the most knowledgeable, trustworthy person that you have access to and let them sift for you in the beginning. Knowing that they're not, this is not a perfect solution. And then when people come to you with differences of opinion or practices, cultural issues and whatever, say to them, look, I'm a new Muslim. I don't really know what's right or wrong here. I'm not an expert. But you go to my teacher, discuss with my teacher what I did wrong, and my teacher will tell me. And that way you can at least sift through some of the worst of it. Then as the person grows, they will learn. And then by then, they will learn even the areas where maybe their teacher got something wrong. They can learn about that as well, inshallah ta'ala. Ikhwan, it's getting very late. And I'm conscious that we have a lot of questions. I've got 42 left on the questions to answer. So what I'm going to do is I love doing this. This has become my go-to thing with questions. Is that what I'd love to do, inshallah ta'ala, is to save these questions. I will leave the account open. So anyone who wants to add questions tonight can open it, can add them. Maybe by tomorrow we'll close it. And then inshallah ta'ala, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a video to answer all of your questions inshallah ta'ala that are outstanding. And I'll send it to the masjid or to the Islamic Society, and so that the people who ask the questions can get the answers inshallah ta'ala. That I find it better, because otherwise we could go for a very, very long time. And I'm conscious that we're pushing towards a couple of hours now. So it's a good place inshallah ta'ala for us to stop. That is what Allah Azza wa Jal made easy for me to mention. And Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.